It was late afternoon when he lifted his head toward the sound of a child's laughter, a soft, bright note cutting through the steady drizzle outside the corner store. He sat on a flattened cardboard box near the entrance, his coat worn thin at the elbows, his hands tucked into the sleeves for warmth. Rain gathered in slow beads along the rim of his hood, sliding off and darkening the pavement beside him. People passed without looking, stepping around him as if he were only part of the concrete, a shape to avoid, not a life to notice. But the little girl stopped. Her shoes splashed in a shallow puddle, sending ripples toward his boots. She held half of a cookie in her small hand, its chocolate chips softening in the rain. She looked at him with the kind of sincerity only a child's eyes can hold, unafraid, curious, warm. He didn't reach for the cookie. He simply offered a tired smile, one that carried a history no one in that street ever cared to ask about. Before a word could form between them, her mother appeared, pulling the girl's wrist with firm, anxious fingers. The woman's voice was sharp enough to cut the quiet air. She scolded her daughter, then cast a cold glance toward him. A look that lasted less than a second, but weighed far more than any insult spoken aloud. The girl, still clutching her cookie, kept her gaze on him as she was guided away, her expression puzzled, almost apologetic. This is Stories That Heal the Heart, where we explore the lives people walk past too quickly, the quiet injustices, the hidden truths, and the way forgiveness sometimes rises from the last place we expect. These are human stories told in the soft light between sorrow and hope, where a single gesture can change the fate of two strangers. If you've ever felt judged by appearances or wished someone could see the part of you that the world overlooks, this story may sit close to your heart. Because on that rainy sidewalk, something was already shifting. A thread pulling two lives together long before either of them understood why. No one in that neighborhood knew who he had been, or why he still chose to remain near the place where parents hurried their children past him. They only saw a man in an old coat, quiet and alone, sitting beneath a flickering store awning. They didn't notice how he watched people with a careful patience, how his eyes followed unsteady steps, or how he instinctively straightened when someone stumbled. They didn't notice the kind of attentiveness that comes from years of tending to fragile lives. A gust of wind pressed the rain sideways, rattling the metal sign above the store door. The mother tightened her grip on her purse and stepped away from the puddles. The girl looked back one more time, her cookie melting in her hand, her innocence stretching toward him like a bridge no adult dared cross. The homeless man lowered his gaze again, as if tucking away something fragile inside himself, something that had once mattered deeply. This is the story of a woman who mocked a man she believed she understood, and of the moment when fate revealed how little she truly knew. It is a story about the crack inside a single judgment and the mercy that can slip through. If stories like this remind you that goodness still lingers in quiet corners, feel welcome to like this video and subscribe so more hearts can find a bit of light in the shadows. The girl's footsteps faded. The mother's voice blended into the rain, and the man remained there beneath the awning, sitting still, watching the sidewalk shimmer under the street lamp as if it held a memory he had never stopped carrying. Tonight, we begin with that moment, the thin line between distance and connection before everything changed. The rain eased into a thin mist the next morning, leaving the storefront glass streaked with drying water and the sidewalk coated in a soft, gray sheen. He was there again, seated beneath the same flickering awning, his posture a little straighter today, as though something in the child's gaze from the evening before had rested gently on his shoulders. His cardboard seat was damp, and he had folded an old jacket beneath him to keep from soaking through. People continued to pass with hurried steps, arms wrapped around themselves against the cold, eyes carefully avoiding him. It was the same choreography performed every day, bodies angling, gazes drifting upward, breaths tightening, as though acknowledging him might burden them with someone else's invisible weight. The morning had a quiet rhythm, the kind a city breathes when the night finally loosens its grip. Delivery trucks exhaled steam as they backed into alleys. A bakery across the street opened its metal shutter, letting out a warm cloud of bread-scented air that drifted toward him before dissolving into the chill. Inside the store, the cashier swept the floors with the same tired pattern of movements. The man outside watched her through the glass, noting how she paused every few seconds to stretch her back. He wasn't judging. It was habit. The instinct to observe posture, breath, tension. Once, long ago, these details had meant everything to him. He had trained his eyes to read the slightest change in a child's expression, the smallest hesitation in a step, a faint tremor in a hand. Those skills never left him, even after the world he knew had unraveled. The mother and daughter from the evening before appeared again, the girl holding a small pink backpack decorated with rainbows. The mother walked briskly, her heels clicking hard against the wet pavement. She didn't look toward him, but the girl did. Her gaze lingered, not with pity, but with the familiar openness he had seen in children many times over the years. Her grip tightened on her mother's coat sleeve, yet she didn't pull away this time. Something in her had recognized something in him, even if she didn't know how to name it. A car sped by, sending a spray of leftover rain toward the curb. The mother's step faltered as she tried to avoid the splash, and in that stuttered motion, her foot skidded across a slick patch of algae hiding between the paving stones. Her purse swung forward. The girl tried to steady her, but the mother's ankle twisted sharply. She fell with a gasp that cut through the street's hum, her knee striking the pavement with a sound that made nearby pedestrians turn their heads. He was on his feet before the purse finished sliding. It wasn't a choice. It was muscle memory, instinct, the old training bursting to the surface like a submerged breath finally rising. His hands moved with quiet precision, steady and sure as he reached her side. One knee lowered carefully to the wet ground. He didn't touch her at first. He simply observed. The angle of the leg, the placement of her hands, the sound of her breathing, the shock in her eyes. People stopped, not to help, but to watch. A woman covered her mouth with her scarf. A teenager pulled out his phone but slowly lowered it again, sensing something solemn in the air. The little girl crouched beside her mother, tears forming without falling. Her hands sought the stability of her mother's sleeve, her small fingers trembling slightly. He spoke softly to the child first, his voice warm and calm, as though he were back in a hospital room lit with soft overhead lamps. "She's going to be okay," he murmured. "She just needs a moment. Stay close." Then he turned to the mother. Her jaw was clenched, both from pain and from the shock of seeing him this close. But the tone in his voice, controlled, precise, reassuring, froze the words she meant to say. "Try not to move your leg," he said. "May I look at your ankle?" She hesitated, embarrassment flickering across her face. People were watching. The homeless man she had pulled her daughter away from was kneeling beside her, offering help she had never imagined she'd need. She nodded. He examined the ankle with careful fingertips, pressing lightly, watching her reaction more than the injury itself. Her breathing hitched when he reached the swelling. He placed one steadying hand behind her back to help her shift her weight away from the injured foot. A delivery driver approached, offering his jacket as a cushion. The man accepted with a grateful nod and eased it beneath her knee. A small act of kindness echoed quietly between strangers. This was the first petala of the morning, the kind of gesture that barely touches the air but changes its temperature. The little girl edged closer, slipping her small hand into her mother's as though the connection might anchor them both. He continued speaking softly. "You're not alone. Help is coming." She looked at him, really looked at him. And something in her expression cracked open. She noticed details she had ignored before, the alertness in his eyes, the deliberate pace of his movements, the gentle authority in his tone. Something about him didn't match the story she had written in her mind. Someone called an ambulance. The sirens whispered their approach in the distance, threaded through the sound of cars and soft rain. Her breathing steadied. The man removed the elastic cuff from the sleeve of his worn jacket and gently tucked it beneath her heel to keep the foot from rotating. She winced, but he reassured her. "You're doing fine." He stayed close, his presence a quiet shelter. A stroller passed nearby, its wheels squeaking. The woman pushing it paused, noticing the scene. She reached into her bag, pulled out a granola bar, and placed it beside him with a brief nod before walking away. Another petala. Fleeting, human, almost invisible but deeply felt. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics rushed toward them. They recognized the quick field assessment he had already done. The ankles supported, the patient calm, the swelling noted, the child comforted. One paramedic glanced at him with a hint of recognition, as if the movements of an old profession never fully fade from a man's hands. "Good job keeping her still," one of them said quietly. He nodded and stepped back, letting them take over. The mother watched him as they placed her on the stretcher. The shame from the evening before lingered in her eyes. But something else was there too. Confusion, gratitude, and a dawning awareness that the world might not be as simple as she had taught her daughter to believe. Before they closed the ambulance doors, the little girl leaned forward, holding a small piece of her cookie, the half she had saved. "This is for you," she said. The mother's breath caught. The man accepted the cookie with both hands, as though the child had given him something far more significant. He didn't eat it. Instead, he placed it gently inside his coat pocket, as if tucking away a fragile promise. As the ambulance drove off, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain-soaked bread from the bakery across the street. He stepped out from beneath the awning and watched the taillights disappear, his coat damp, his heart unexpectedly warm. He didn't know that the woman, even in pain, had noticed something else before they drove away. A small object that had fallen near him when he knelt down. A simple stethoscope charm attached to an old keychain. She didn't yet understand what it meant, but she would. The hospital waiting room hummed with the usual mixture of fluorescent lights, distant footsteps, and the faint rustle of plastic chairs shifting under anxious bodies. The mother sat with her leg elevated on a cushioned stool, a thin blanket draped over her lap. Her daughter leaned against her side, her small fingers tracing soft lines along the edge of the blanket, as if the motion could smooth out the confusion swirling inside her. A nurse had already examined the mother, confirming a sprained ankle but nothing broken. Still, the sting of the fall lingered, not just in her leg, but in the bruised corners of her pride. She replayed the moment again and again. The rain, the slip, the shock, his hands steady around her, the compassion she had not expected, the certainty in his voice. She had lived long enough to know that some truths arrive quietly, like a hand reaching out through the storm, asking nothing in return. Her daughter tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mama, is he okay?" The mother blinked. "Who, sweetie?" "The man," the girl whispered. "The one you didn't want me to talk to. The one who helped you." The word stung with a soft, precise accuracy. The innocence in her daughter's tone left no room for excuses. The mother swallowed, running a hand over the girl's hair. I think he's more than we thought," she said quietly. Before the girl could respond, the door to the hallway opened with a soft click, and a doctor stepped inside, clipboard pressed to his chest. His white coat was crisp, but his eyes carried the soft heaviness of someone who'd lived through too many nights without sleep. He cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Davis, may I speak with you for a moment?" She nodded, motioning for her daughter to stay close. The doctor pulled up a chair and settled beside them, folding his hands. "Your ankle will heal with some rest and care, but I understand something else happened today, something that brought you here." His tone wasn't clinical. It was curious, compassionate, open. She exhaled slowly. "Yes, and I'm not sure how to explain it. A homeless man helped me. He knew exactly what to do." The doctor's eyebrows lifted a fraction, not in disbelief but in recognition. "Could you describe him?" She paused. "Worn coat, tired eyes, gentle hands. He moved like someone trained, someone who's done this all his life." The doctor nodded slowly, as though assembling a puzzle he already knew the shape of. "Did he have any personal items with him? Anything distinctive?" She hesitated. There was a keychain, a little stethoscope charm hanging from it. The doctor leaned back, closing his eyes for a brief second, a gesture of someone remembering something heavy. He stood and motioned toward the hallway. "Come with me. There's someone you need to know about." He led them through the hospital corridor, past rooms glowing with soft yellow light and voices murmuring behind curtains. They stopped by a bulletin board filled with photographs. Smiling children holding stuffed animals. Thank you cards written in uneven crayon lines. Drawings of stick-figure doctors with capes. In the center of the board sat a faded newspaper clipping, its edges curled with time. The doctor touched the photo gently. "This," he said, "is Dr. Nathan Hale." The mother leaned closer. The photo showed a younger version of the man they'd met. Hair less gray, eyes bright, smile easy and unburdened. He wore a white coat with a pediatric badge pinned neatly to the pocket. He held a baby in his arms, the child gripping his thumb with tiny fingers. "He was one of the best pediatricians we ever had," the doctor continued. "Brilliant, compassionate. Every child loved him. Every parent trusted him." "But what happened to him?" she asked softly, feeling her throat tighten. The doctor exhaled. "He gave everything he had to families who couldn't afford treatment. And I don't mean just working overtime or offering discounts. He paid for surgeries, medicine, travel expenses. He'd show up at people's homes in the middle of the night. It cost him more than money. His marriage crumbled under the weight, his savings drained, his health suffered." He paused, his jaw tightening as he searched for the right words. "When his mother fell ill, he took care of her alone. He stopped working to be by her side. And when she passed," the doctor's voice dipped, "he never returned to himself. We tried to help, but he disappeared before we could." The mother felt her daughter's fingers slip into hers, warm and trembling. "He lost everything," the doctor said. "But he never stopped caring. Some mornings people call us saying a man helped their child on the street, stopped a choking incident, calmed a panic attack, cleaned a wound. We knew it had to be him." The girl looked up, eyes wide. "He's a hero." The doctor smiled gently. "He always was." A silence settled among them, soft, reverent, full of the weight of a truth that had been hidden too long. The mother felt something move in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Shame braided with awe, regret stitched together with a quiet, trembling gratitude. The doctor placed a hand on her shoulder. He helped you today because that's who he is. Not because of what he has, but because of what he refuses to lose. His heart, the girl whispered. Yes, the doctor replied. Exactly that. They stood there for a long moment, the mother staring at the photograph as though trying to memorize the man she had judged in a heartbeat. Behind her eyes, a shift was happening, a subtle, painful, necessary loosening of the assumptions she had carried for far too long. She finally turned to the doctor. Where is he now? The doctor's expression softened. He never stays in one place, but he always circles back here. As if this hospital is the last piece of home he still recognizes. The girl pressed her face into her mother's side. I want to find him, she murmured. I want to give him the rest of my cookie. Her mother's heart cracked open completely. The doctor straightened. If you truly want to thank him, don't just give him a cookie. Give him dignity. Give him the one thing the world hasn't given him in years. The mother swallowed hard. And what's that? Belief, he said simply. Believe in him the way he believed in the children he treated. That's the gift that might bring him back. They stepped away from the bulletin board, the weight of the past following them like a shadow that had finally been named. The girl held her mother's hand tightly, carrying her innocence like a lantern through the dim hallway. Outside the hospital window, rain began to fall again, but softer this time, like a quiet invitation for someone lost to find their way home. The rain had quieted by the time they left the hospital, settling into a soft mist that clung to the streetlights like a thin veil. Evening was drawing its slow curtain across the sky, turning the clouds a shade of bruised violet. The mother stepped carefully, leaning on the crutches the nurse had provided, while her daughter walked close beside her, umbrella tilting slightly to cover them both. The rhythm of their steps was uneven. One clicking crutch, one small foot, one gentle pause to steady the injured ankle. But their silence held a new weight, a shared purpose neither fully understood yet. They reached the corner of the street where he had helped her that morning. The awning above the shop still flickered, a lonely glow sputtering in the wind. But the cardboard seat was empty. His folded jacket was gone. Only a small scrap of the bakery's tissue paper remained under the awning, drifting in circles whenever the breeze lifted it. He's not here, Mama, the girl whispered. The mother felt something inside her sink, a feeling she hadn't been ready to name, but now it pulsed with unmistakable clarity. Regret. Not the fleeting kind that fades with time, but the deep, aching kind that sits heavy in the stomach, where truth presses against pride until something finally gives way. She looked up and down the sidewalk as if he might be standing just beyond the reach of the streetlight, but the shadows held no familiar shape. People like him, she began softly, then paused, catching herself. That phrase, people like him, suddenly tasted wrong in her mouth. Too small, too cruel, too easy. She tried again. Nathan? He must move around a lot. The girl's small fingers curled around her mother's hand. We can still find him, she said with quiet determination. Heroes don't disappear. The mother swallowed, hearing in her daughter's voice the echo of a truth she herself was still learning to hold. She had spent years building opinions as if they were fences, believing they kept her family safe. But now she saw how they had only kept her heart small, closed, unprepared to recognize goodness when it appeared in worn shoes and a tired smile. They crossed the street slowly, crutches tapping a steady rhythm on the damp pavement. The city lights blurred into soft halos on the ground, reflections of a world moving on without noticing the man who once saved it, one child at a time. At the bakery door, warm air spilled out along with the smell of cinnamon and freshly baked rolls. The girl tugged her mother gently inside. The owner, a kind-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, greeted them with a nod. "Back again?" she asked, her voice lined with warmth. The mother hesitated. "Actually, we're looking for someone. A man who sits outside sometimes, worn coat, quiet, gentle." The bakery owner's expression shifted, softening with recognition. "Ah, Nathan." The girl brightened. "You know him." The woman nodded, wiping flour from her hands. "He comes by early in the morning, never asks for anything. I offer him a roll when I can. He always says thank you like he hasn't heard kindness in a long while." She paused, her eyes misting. "I've seen him patch up strangers right on the sidewalk. Last winter, he helped an old man who fainted near the bus stop. He worked so calmly, like someone who once lived in a different world." "He did," the girl said. "He was a doctor." The owner froze, her breath catching. "I always suspected something like that. There's a steadiness in his hands, a way he looks at people, like he's taking care of them even when they don't notice." The mother felt a lump form in her throat. She had walked past that steadiness every day, blind to it. "Do you know where he goes at night?" she asked. The owner shook her head. "Not exactly, but..." She glanced toward the back window. "There's a bench behind the bakery. Sometimes I leave bread there after closing. In the mornings it's gone. He never takes much, just enough to get him through the day." The girl squeezed her mother's hand. "Can we check?" They moved through the narrow alley behind the bakery, the air carrying the scent of rain-soaked concrete and warm sugar. A dim security light buzzed overhead, casting a faint glow across the small wooden bench. The mother's breath hitched when she saw it. A thin blanket folded neatly on one side, an empty cup on the ground beside it, and a paperback novel with soft, worn edges resting on the seat. The little girl picked up the book gently, as though it were something fragile. On the inside cover, written in a careful hand, were the words, "Never stop showing up for the small miracles." The mother felt tears gather suddenly, surprising her with their warmth. She traced the handwriting with trembling fingers. "What does it mean, Mama?" her daughter asked. She shook her head, slowly. "It means he still believes in things most people gave up on." The girl placed the book back on the bench, careful not to disturb the blanket. "Maybe he'll come back," she whispered. They waited. For a few minutes, then longer. The mother leaned on her crutches, her breath rising visibly in the cool air. Every sound, footsteps in the distance, a car turning the corner, the rustle of wind, sparked a small hope in the girl's eyes. But he did not come. When the wind picked up and the cold deepened, the mother finally placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We'll keep looking," she promised. "Not because we owe him, but because it's the right thing to do." The girl nodded, her face solemn but bright with conviction. As they stepped back toward the street, the girl looked over her shoulder one last time. The bench, the blanket, the book. They felt like pieces of a life held together by threads too thin for most people to see, yet her innocent eyes understood them instantly. "Mama," she said softly, "I think he's lonely." The mother swallowed hard. "I think you're right." She felt a shift within her, small but powerful, like a locked window finally opening. Judgment had once been her shield. Now it felt more like a weight she no longer wanted to carry. As they walked away, The bakery owner stepped outside, folding her arms against the cold. She watched them go, a faint, hopeful smile touching her lips. "Maybe," she murmured into the quiet, "this time, someone will save him." The rain began again, light, gentle, tapping softly against rooftops and gutters. Somewhere in the city, beneath another awning or curled beneath another blanket, the man who once healed so many sat alone, unaware that two small hearts were now searching for him, carrying the one thing the doctor at the hospital had said he needed most: belief. Night settled over the city with the slow heaviness of a blanket being drawn across the sky. Streetlights blinked awake one by one, scattering soft halos of amber over the wet pavement. The mother stood by her living room window, her crutches leaning against the armchair, watching the rain bead and slide down the glass in thin, trembling lines. Her daughter was asleep in the next room, curled beneath her pink blanket, breathing softly, unaware of how profoundly the day had changed the shape of their world. The mother let out a quiet sigh, pressing her palm to the cool window pane. For years she had lived inside a rigid certainty that people could be understood at a glance, that safety came from distance. That goodness fit inside neat, comfortable categories. But now, her certainty had cracks, thin and undeniable, like lightning frozen in glass. And through those cracks, a different version of herself began to look back at her. She remembered his hands, steady, warm, instinctive. She remembered the way he spoke to her daughter first, calming her before tending to the injury. She remembered how he thanked the child for the cookie with both hands, as though accepting something sacred. She remembered the small stethoscope charm glinting against the rain-darkened pavement. She closed her eye. She knew what she had to do tomorrow. At dawn, the city was still damp with night rain, its edges softened by a pale morning fog. The mother and her daughter walked slowly, the crutches tapping a gentle rhythm beside them. They retraced their steps, first to the store, then to the bakery, then to the quiet alley where the wooden bench sat beneath the humming security light. But the blanket was gone, the cup was gone, the book was gone. Only a faint indentation on the bench remained, as though someone had sat there long enough to leave a small, hollow shadow behind. The girl's face fell. "Mama," he left again. The mother knelt beside her, awkward, on her injured ankle, but steady, and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. "We'll find him," she said softly. "People don't disappear. Not really. Not when someone is truly looking." They moved along the sidewalk, searching corners, doorways, bus stops. The fog clung to them like a thin, breathing presence. They passed a construction site where workers were setting up for the day. A laundromat with humming dryers, a small park where early joggers cut across the damp grass. The girl peered into every shadow, her hope unshaken. They reached an underpass where the city's sounds echoed in low, hollow notes. There on a concrete step sat a man wearing an old jacket and holding a thermos someone must have given him. His beard was gray, his expression weary, but he wasn't Nathan. The girl approached him anyway. "Excuse me. Have you seen a man who helps people? He has a little stethoscope on his keychain." The man blinked, surprised by her kindness. He pointed toward the eastern side of the neighborhood. "Try the old bus depot," he rasped. "He used to sleep there sometimes, when it was cold." The mother thanked him, her voice gentle. The girl waved at him before stepping back to her mother's side. They walked on. The bus depot stood like a forgotten skeleton of the city. Rusted beams, cracked concrete, and old posters peeling from the walls. A distant train horn vibrated through the air, scattering pigeons perched on the rafters. The mother and daughter stepped cautiously across the uneven ground, their breaths visible in the cold morning light. "Nathan?" the girl called softly. A shuffling sound echoed from behind a broken ticket booth. The mother tensed. The girl held her hand. From the shadows emerged a man pushing a shopping cart filled with blankets and old clothing. He wasn't Nathan either, but he recognized the name. "You looking for the doc?" he asked. The mother swallowed. "Yes. Do you know him?" The man nodded slowly, his expression softening. "Everyone out here knows him. He walks at night, checks on folks sleeping rough, patches up cuts, shares whatever food people give him. Sometimes he prays with us, not with words, but with how he sits beside you like you're not invisible." The girl's eyes glistened. "Where does he go during the day?" The man pointed toward a narrow strip of land beneath an overpass. "There's a small shelter down there. Not an official one, just a place folks built themselves. He helps out sometimes, makes sure the older ones stay warm." The mother nodded gratefully. "Thank you." As they walked toward the overpass, cars rumbled above them like distant thunder. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth and faint traces of gasoline. The girl clutched her mother's hand tightly, her steps quick with expectation. They reached the shelter, a cluster of makeshift tents, tarps tied to posts, blankets draped over shopping carts. A few people stirred as they approached, their faces wary at first, then softening when the girl's small figure came into view. A woman with kind eyes stepped forward. Her coat was patched but warm, her hands rough from cold mornings. She smiled at the girl. "You must be looking for someone." The girl nodded eagerly. "Nathan!" The woman's smile deepened with affection. "Ah, the quiet angel." The mother's breath caught. "Is he here?" The woman looked toward the far end of the shelter, where a tent sat a little apart from the others. "Not at the moment, but he was here last night. Stayed up late helping Mr. Fields. He has trouble breathing when it's damp." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "He doesn't sleep much. Some nights he walks until dawn." The girl frowned. "Why?" The woman's eyes softened with a kind of sadness that comes from knowing too much of life. "Because when you lose everything, sometimes rest feels too heavy to hold, but he carries it as gently as he carries all of us, even when he's tired." The mother felt tears sting her eyes. The girl lifted her chin. "We need to find him. I need to give him something." The woman knelt to eye level with her. "Then you'll find him. Kind hearts always do." They stayed for a while, asking quiet questions, listening to stories of small miracles Nathan had left scattered across the city like breadcrumbs of compassion. The time he warmed a child's hands with his own, the night he sat beside an injured dog until help arrived, the morning he helped an elderly woman cross the street even though his own legs trembled from exhaustion. Each story stitched another thread into the mother's heart. When they finally stepped back into the daylight, the fog had begun to lift. Rays of sunlight pierced through the gray clouds, illuminating the sidewalk in narrow beams. The girl looked up at her mother. "We'll find him," she said with quiet certainty. The mother nodded, her voice thick. "Yes, we will." And somewhere, just beyond the next corner, a man with tired eyes and a stethoscope charm on his keychain stepped into a patch of sunlight he didn't yet know was guiding him home. By late afternoon, the city had changed its colors again. The gray had softened into a gentle gold, the kind that settles over rooftops like a quiet promise. The mother and her daughter walked with slower steps now, not from discouragement, but from a growing sense of direction, as if every corner they turned brought them closer to something the heart could feel before the eyes could see. They returned to the street where it had all begun. The flickering awning, the puddle-scarred sidewalk, the familiar hum of passing cars. The girl paused beneath the awning, her hand drifting to the place where she had first offered half of her cookie. She almost whispered a small prayer into the damp evening air, as if the city itself might carry her words to the man she searched for. "Mama, do you think he knows we're looking for him?" The mother stood in silence for a moment, feeling the pulse of her own thoughts. She remembered the doctor's words, that Nathan stayed close to the hospital, circling it like the last orbit of a world he once belonged to. She remembered the blanket, the worn book, the soft indentation on the wooden bench. She remembered strangers who spoke of him with reverence, as if he were a guardian moving quietly in the margins of their lives. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Somehow, I think he does." A soft breeze lifted the edges of her coat. The girl slipped her hand into her mother's pocket, and together they stepped toward the hospital that stood just 3 blocks away. Their steps small but determined, like two hearts learning a new rhythm of compassion. The hospital grounds glowed beneath the setting sun, long shadows stretching across the courtyard. The mother felt her breath catch as they approached. Nurses in pale scrubs hurried past, visitors carried bouquets of daisies or folded jackets over one arm, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the cool air. The girl pulled gently on her mother's sleeve. "Look." Near the far side of the courtyard, by a row of white benches, sat a man with a familiar posture. Shoulders curved inward, hands resting quietly on his knees, gaze lowered to the ground as though studying something only he could see. His coat was the same worn one, still damp at the edges. His hood was drawn loosely over his head, and hanging from his keychain, faint but unmistakable in the fading light, was the small silver charm of a stethoscope. The girl didn't move at first. Her chest rose with a trembling breath, her eyes widening in recognition. The mother placed a hand over her heart, steadying herself against a tide of emotion she had not been ready for. He hadn't noticed them yet. He sat very still, lost in a silence that looked both familiar and lonely. A silence that felt like he had lived inside it for too many years, wrapped in memories no one else could carry. The girl stepped forward. Her mother followed, leaning carefully on her crutches, her heart tightening with every step. The closer they came, the clearer the small details became. The frayed seams on his sleeve, the calluses on his fingertips, the fine lines etched around his eyes, lines shaped not by age alone, but by grief, by compassion, by years of watching over others while having no one to watch over him. When they reached the bench, the girl stopped just a few feet away. "Hi," she said softly. He lifted his head, startled. His eyes, tired, gentle, full of old stories, settled first on the child, then on the mother. Recognition flickered through them like the glow of a wick finally catching flame. "You," he murmured, his voice quiet but warm. "You're the little girl from the store." She nodded. "And you're the man who helped my mama." His gaze softened even more, a fragile light filling the weary edges of his expression. He glanced toward the mother's crutches, concern immediately rising in his eyes. "How's the ankle?" he asked. The mother swallowed, her throat tight. "Better. Because of you." He looked down, as though he didn't quite know what to do with gratitude anymore. The girl stepped closer and reached into her small backpack. From inside, she pulled out a fresh cookie, wrapped carefully in a napkin, its chip soft and warm from her hand. "This time," she said, offering it to him, "it's the whole thing." The man blinked, startled by the gesture. His hands hovered uncertainly, as though afraid to take something he didn't believe he deserved. But the girl insisted, stretching her arm a little farther. Her eyes were clear, sincere, glowing with the simple belief the doctor had told them to give him, the belief that could mend what the world had broken in him. He took the cookie slowly, reverently, as though receiving something sacred again. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The mother stepped forward then, leaning heavily on her crutches, her heart folding inward with humility. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling. "For the way I looked at you, for the way I judged you. I was wrong, and I'm so deeply sorry." He said nothing at first. His breath caught, his shoulders tensed, then softened. No one had apologized to him in years, perhaps not since before his life had unraveled. The apology seemed to land somewhere deep inside him, stirring something long dormant. "You don't owe me anything," he said gently. "I only did what anyone should do." The mother shook her head. "No, not anyone. You." She swallowed hard. "I know who you are now, and I want my daughter to know your story from the truth, not from the assumptions I made." His hands trembled slightly. He glanced at the girl, then at the hospital wall where faded drawings of children smiled from the bulletin board inside. "I used to work here," he murmured. The girl nodded proudly. "You were a doctor, a real one, a good one." He closed his eyes briefly, the weight of memory settling over him. The weight of rooms filled with tiny heartbeats, of long nights spent at bedsides, of parents who trusted him with the most fragile part of their worlds. "I was," he whispered, "a long time ago." "Not a long time ago," the girl insisted softly, "just before today." He opened his eyes again, startled by her words, words so simple and yet so profound that they seemed to lift a piece of the shame he had carried for years. The mother lowered herself carefully onto the bench beside him. "I want you to know," she said gently, "you didn't lose who you are. You only lost what the world gave you, but the part of you that healed children, that saved lives, that part is still here." His eyes glistened. "And we see it," she added. "We see you." A tear escaped down his cheek, the quiet kind that doesn't break a man, but frees him. The girl reached up and gently placed her small hand over his. "You saved my mom," she whispered. "Can we help save you?" For a moment the air around them held its breath. The man stared at their joined hands, her small one, warm and hopeful, his larger one, worn and trembling. Something inside him shifted, not loudly, but with a soft cracking sound, like ice beginning to give way to spring. Behind them, the lights of the hospital glowed softly, illuminating this small circle of humanity the world had overlooked too long. He drew a shaky breath. "I don't know how to be helped," he said, voice breaking. "That's okay," the mother replied. "We'll learn together." And for the first time in years, the man who once saved countless children allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't meant to walk through the world alone anymore. The evening deepened around them, the last light of day sinking behind the hospital's silhouette, as if the sky itself were exhaling. A softness settled over the courtyard, the kind of quiet that invites truth to rise gently from places long hidden. Nathan sat beside them with the cookie still resting in his hand, untouched, his fingers curled around it like someone holding a fragile memory. The mother and daughter remained close, their presence a steady warmth against the long cold of his solitude. For a few moments, none of them spoke. The air carried the faint hum of an ambulance arriving in the distance, its lights swirling against the polished glass doors. Nathan watched the reflections with an expression half longing, half sorrow. A man gazing through a window into a life he once lived, unsure if he still belonged to it. The girl broke the silence first. "Did you fix a lot of kids?" she asked softly, swinging her feet lightly above the ground. Nathan's lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. "I tried," he answered. "Some days were better than others." "What was the best day?" she asked, leaning forward, eyes wide. He hesitated. The question touched a part of him he had kept locked away, wrapped in layers of grief and gratitude. He let out a long, slow breath. "There was a boy," he began. "He was very sick, very fragile, and he wasn't expected to make it through the night." His voice grew softer, almost as though he were speaking to the memory itself. His mother sat beside his bed, holding his hand and singing softly. She didn't sleep at all. She just stayed all night. The mother beside him felt her throat tighten, something in the story echoing the fear every mother carries, the ache that never fully leaves. "At dawn," Nathan continued, his breathing stabilized, his pulse strengthened. He opened his eyes and smiled, a small smile, but real, the kind that makes everything worth it. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the memory wash through him. "We celebrated quietly, just the three of us. His mother hugged me like I'd saved her entire world." The girl's voice rose into a whisper. "Did he get better?" "He did," Nathan said. "He grew up, sent me drawings every birthday for years." His voice cracked. "I kept every one." The girl smiled. The mother blinked back tears. "What about the hardest day?" the girl asked gently, as children often do. Not out of cruelty, but because they trust the truth. Nathan's face changed. A shadow moved across it, slow and devastating. His fingers gripped the edge of the bench, knuckles whitening. "There was another boy," he said quietly. "Younger, too young." His breath shook. "I did everything I could, everything. But sometimes everything isn't enough." The courtyard held its breath. "I told his mother," he whispered. "I held her while she cried, and I never stopped hearing that grief, never stopped carrying it." The mother placed her hand over his forearm, a simple human gesture, one that didn't pretend to fix anything but offered space for pain to sit without shame. "Grief doesn't mean you failed," she murmured. "It means you cared." Nathan's head bowed. "It broke me," he confessed. "Not just that day, but all the days after. All the ones I tried to keep together while something inside me came undone." The girl scooted closer, resting her head gently against his arm. He froze, startled by the warmth of her trust, then let his shoulders soften around the small weight leaning on him. "You didn't break," she whispered. "You're still helping people. You helped us." Nathan let out a trembling breath, the kind that sounds like the first crack of a long frozen river. He looked at the child with something like awe. "I don't know why you're being so kind to me," he said quietly. "Because you're good," she replied simply, "and people forgot to tell you." The mother felt something inside her loosen, as if the truth the girl spoke had been waiting inside her too, trapped beneath layers of judgment she had never questioned. Nathan wiped at his eyes with the back of his sleeve. "I don't know how to find my way back," he admitted. "You don't have to find it alone," the mother said. "Sometimes the way back is the people who walk with you." He looked at her then, truly looked, and saw not the woman who pulled her daughter away in fear and cold certainty, but the woman who had returned with humility, carrying her daughter's innocence like a lantern through the dark. She took a steady breath. I want to help you, Nathan. Whether that means finding you a place to stay, bringing you meals, or just being someone you can talk to." Her voice trembled with sincerity. "You saved me on that sidewalk, not just my ankle. I'm me, my perspective, my pride, and I owe you more than an apology." He stared at her, stunned. For years he had learned to expect nothing, accept scraps, disappear into corners where hope couldn't follow. Now, hope had found him. Standing in front of him with a child's soft hands and a mother's trembling honesty. "I'm not sure I deserve all that," he whispered. The mother shook her head. "Deserving isn't the point. You're human, and humans need each other." The girl nodded firmly. "You can come to our house." The mother laughed softly through her tears. "Maybe not all at once, but we can start with dinner. A warm meal, a real seat at a real table." Nathan looked away, overwhelmed. For a moment he seemed to shrink inward, as if the offer itself was too bright, too warm, too alive for the version of himself he had become. I don't know," he murmured. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be," the mother replied. "Burden is when we ignore each other. Healing is when we don't." A long silence followed, a silence full of the turning of gears inside a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen with compassion instead of pity, dignity instead of judgment. Finally, Nathan drew in a deep breath. Maybe I can start by walking with you, just for a while." The girl beamed. The mother nodded. They stood together, slowly, awkwardly, beautifully. Nathan hesitated before rising, as if afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too quickly. The girl grabbed two of his fingers with her tiny hand, tugging him gently toward the courtyard gate. He allowed himself to follow. As they stepped toward the sidewalk, the hospital lights glowed behind them, casting long shadows that stretched forward, merging, overlapping, walking together as though this small trio had always been meant to cross paths. The wind picked up again, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked pavement, and something else too. Something tender, fragile, quietly blooming. Possibility. They walked together beneath the settling dusk, their footsteps slow and uneven, yet somehow perfectly in rhythm. The mother leaned carefully on her crutches while Nathan matched her pace, his posture uncertain at first, as if he feared taking up too much space beside them. But the girl walked between them, swinging her small hand in his as naturally as if she'd known him all her life. It was her quiet insistence, her gentle, unspoken belief that held them together as they moved down the sidewalk toward home. The streets glowed with the soft amber haze of nightfall. Cars hummed by with their lights reflected on the wet pavement, stretching in long, shimmering streaks that seemed to guide them forward. They passed the storefront where it all began. The flickering awning, the uneven tiles, the memory of an old cookie melting in the rain. Nathan paused there, his eyes lowering, his body still. The girl squeezed his hand. "It's okay," she whispered. He nodded faintly. Her trust felt like a light placed carefully in his hands, fragile but steady. He allowed himself to breathe, then stepped forward again. When they reached the mother's apartment building, Nathan hesitated at the bottom step. He looked up toward the warm glow shining from the windows above. The unmistakable warmth of a lived-in home, a place where dinner scents linger in the walls, where someone's laughter still echoes after they leave the room. A place he hadn't belonged to in a very long time. "You can come in," the girl said simply, her voice gentle and certain. The mother smiled softly at her daughter's instinct, then looked at Nathan with the same quiet reassurance. "If you want," she added, "only if you're comfortable." Nathan's mouth parted. But no sound came out. He lowered his gaze, his breath trembling in the cool air. I don't remember the last time I sat at a table," he murmured. "You will tonight," the girl said. "With us." The mother nodded, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes, tears of a woman facing her own transformation. She remembered the woman she'd been just a day earlier, guarded, hurried, confident in the safety of her judgments. She looked now at the man before her and at the daughter beside her and realized something profound had shifted inside her. A widening of the heart she had never expected, a humbling she deeply needed. She extended her hand. Nathan stared at it for a moment. Then, slowly, with the same hesitation as someone learning to trust their own legs again, he reached out and took it. They climbed the stairs together. Inside the apartment, the mother guided him toward the table, a simple wooden table, a little scratched, corners worn from years of use, but warm and inviting in the golden lamplight. Nathan hovered near the doorway, unsure of the rules in a place like this, unsure of how to exist in a space filled with softness instead of survival. "You can sit anywhere," the mother said gently. He nodded, then chose the chair closest to the wall, as though instinctively seeking a place where he wouldn't be in the way. The girl climbed onto the chair beside him, resting her chin on the table's edge. The mother moved around the kitchen slowly, careful with her injured ankle but determined. She placed a pot of warm soup on the stove, its scent, garlic, herbs, and slow-cooked vegetables, drifting softly through the room. The smell made Nathan blink in surprise. It wasn't just hunger. It was the sudden memory of something he hadn't felt in years, being cared for. The girl leaned closer. "Do you like soup?" Nathan nodded, his voice small. "Very much." She grinned as if this were the most important answer in the world. When the mother finally set the bowls on the table, Nathan looked at them the way one looks at a fragile dream, with disbelief, with longing, and with fear that it might vanish if touched too quickly. "Go on," the mother said. "Eat while it's warm." He lifted the spoon slowly. His hands trembled, not from the weight of the spoon, but from the weight of the moment. The first sip stopped him cold, not because of the taste, but because of the flood of something deeper, the sense of being human again. The girl watched him carefully. "Good?" Nathan nodded. His eyes shone. "Better than I remember." They ate quietly at first, the room filled only with the clink of spoons and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Then the girl began talking. About school, about her favorite book, about the cookie she had given him, about the dream she had last night where all the stray cats in the neighborhood wore little hats. Nathan listened, really listened. And every now and then, a small smile crossed his lips, the kind that carried the faint memory of who he used to be. The mother watched them both, her heart swelling with a gratitude that hurt. She had walked past him so many times, convinced she understood the world, convinced she knew danger from safety, worthiness from threat. She realized now how blind she had been. After dinner, Nathan helped her rinse the dishes. He moved with the practiced rhythm of a man who had once belonged to places like this, homes, kitchens, quiet routines, before life had bent him under its weight. "You don't have to do that," she said. He shook his head softly. "I want to." When the dishes were done, they all sat in the living room. The girl curled against her mother, and Nathan sat on the edge of the couch, his posture still careful, still unsure if he was allowed to relax. The mother handed him a warm mug of tea. He held it for a long moment before speaking. "I'm afraid," he said quietly. "I don't know how to start over." The girl reached for his hand again. "That's okay," she whispered. "You can start over with us." His breath trembled. He closed his eyes. The mother leaned forward, her voice steady. "Nathan, you have saved so many lives. Maybe it's time someone helped save yours." He looked at her, really looked. And something in his expression broke open. Years of silence, years of walking unnoticed through a world he once served, years of trying to carry his grief alone. It all rose to the surface and softened in the warmth of this small room. "Why me?" he whispered. "Because kindness doesn't expire," the mother answered, "and neither does your worth." A tear slid down his cheek. He didn't hide it. He didn't apologize for it. For the first time in a long time, he allowed someone to see him exactly as he was, wounded, exhausted, human. The girl rested her head against his arm. "We want you here." And slowly enough that the moment felt sacred, Nathan leaned back against the couch. The tension in his shoulders eased, his breath steadied, his eyes softened. He belonged. Not because he earned it, not because he proved anything, but because a child refused to see him as anything less than worthy, and a mother chose to rewrite her heart after nearly losing her own humanity on a rainy sidewalk. Outside, the night deepened, warm light spilling from the windows into the street below. A soft rain began again, gentle, cleansing, tapping lightly on the glass as if applauding the quiet miracle unfolding inside. In that small apartment, 3 lives that had once moved separately now rested close, connected by the simplest truth of all. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who save us. Sometimes the healing we seek begins with seeing each other clearly, and sometimes a single act of compassion, half a cookie in the rain, is enough to bring a broken man home.